She came looking for her sister and found the Count who became the love of her life. Hello, dear viewer. A very warm welcome to this literary journey that crosses time to touch your heart today. Have you ever wondered what truth is worth? What would your quest for justice cost when all seems lost? In this narrative, we will meet Emily, a young woman who will risk everything to find her missing sister in the shadows of a French chateau. Amidst secret gardens, scars of war, and roses that hold mysteries, we will discover that the deepest love doesn't always wear noble attire, and that courage can bloom even in the most wounded hearts. This is a story about dignity, about silenced voices that echo through the centuries, about the power of women who healed with their hands and ancestral wisdom. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching us from? What city or country brought you to this story? Leave it in the comments. I love knowing where the souls who appreciate deep narratives come from. And if you appreciate stories that touch the soul, that make us reflect on dignity, justice, and true love, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Your support keeps these narratives alive, rescuing what is most human in us. Now take a deep breath, light a candle if you wish, and let me take you to the year 1874, Chateau Bellerive, Burgundy region, France autumn. 3 years after the Great War, the carriage groaned one last time before stopping before the iron gates of Chateau Bellerive. Emily Rousseau clutched the small, worn, leather-bound book to her chest, the only possession she had brought besides her simple clothes and the invisible weight she carried in her heart. It was the book of medicinal plants that had belonged to her mother, and before her grandmother. Yellowed pages filled with delicate illustrations of herbs, roots, and flowers, accompanied by recipes written in the feminine script of past generations. The castle rose before her like a sentinel of grey stone, its Norman towers piercing the autumn sky, which announced itself in shades of bronze and lead. Ivy climbed the ancient walls, green fingers gripping the wounds of time. The October wind carried the damp scent of earth, of decaying leaves and something else, lavender. Always lavender. Emily closed her eyes. The perfume transported her back 7 months, to when she still received letters from her sister. Marguerite wrote about the glass greenhouse, about the plants she cultivated under special permission from the Valmont family, about the secret gardens she had discovered. Her words were filled with enthusiasm, with that passion that had always characterized the eldest Rousseau, the girl who at 10 already knew more herbs than the village apothecary. Then the silence. March arrived without letters. April passed like a ghost. May, June, July. Each month a black hole where light had once been. When Emily finally gathered the courage to travel to Bellerive, she found only a cold official story. Marguerite Rousseau had fled, taking family jewels, dishonor, betrayal, forgetfulness. But Emily knew her sister. She knew her integrity, which burned like a silent fire, her devotion to the plants that healed, her deep respect for everything that grew from the earth. Marguerite would never steal. She would never flee without a word. Something had happened, something terrible enough to erase a life from the official pages of history. And so Emily had forged references from a non-existent house in Dijon, sewn lies with the same skill her mother had sewn wounds, and crossed Burgundy to this portal of stone and silence. You must be the new chambermaid. The voice cut through her thoughts like scissors through silk. Madame Thérèse Girard materialized on the portico, an austere figure cloaked in black, her grey hair pulled into a severe bun that seemed to pull the skin of her face taut. Brown eyes appraised Emily with the precision of someone measuring fabric for shrouds. Yes, madame. Emily Rousseau at your service. The surname hung in the air for an instant. Emily watched closely, but if the housekeeper recognized the name of the missing sister, she showed no sign. Her face remained a mask of professional efficiency. Come in. I will make the rules clear from the beginning. Madame Girard turned, and Emily followed her through corridors that smelled of beeswax and stagnant time. The north wing is your territory. Guest rooms, the library, the reception halls. The south wing remains off limits. They are the Count's private quarters, and he does not tolerate intrusions. Is the Count ill? Emily asked with the studied innocence of one who knew nothing. Madame Girard stopped. Something passed through her eyes, pity, fear. Before she answered, Count Henri de Valmont returned from the war changed. He prefers solitude. You will never see him, and that is a blessing, believe me. What happens in the south wing is no concern of the servants. They crossed the grand hall, where a portrait dominated the main wall. A young man, perhaps 30, wearing the uniform of a captain in the French army. Grey-blue eyes stared at some distant point, with the confidence of one who had not yet known hell. His face was aristocratic, with strong symmetrical lines framed by dark hair. The painting was dated 1869. The golden plaque read, "Before the war that shattered France." The Count when he was still just a man, Madame Girard murmured more to herself. The war robs us of much more than lives. Emily was led to her room, a small but clean space adjacent to the former quarters of Countess Marie de Valmont, deceased 5 years prior. As she unpacked her few possessions, her fingers brushed against the book of plants. She opened it to a random page, and there it was. The black rose, in truth, a rose with petals so dark purple they seemed to absorb the light. Below, in her mother's handwriting, grows only in secret gardens. Her symbol of feminine mysteries, of hidden truths. Marguerite's last letter echoed in her mind. I found Lady Marie's secret garden. The answers are where the black roses grow. Emily closed the book and looked out the narrow window. Outside, beyond the formal gardens, a structure of glass and iron shone in the dimming twilight. The greenhouse. Her heart quickened. That was where Marguerite spent her nights. According to the letters, that was where it all began. And that was where Emily would begin to search. Night fell on Bellerive like a black velvet cloak, and with it, the first thread of a truth that would take months to fully unravel. The first days at Bellerive unfolded in a routine of mechanical gestures and attentive ears. Carefully polished mirrors that reflected empty corridors, dusted heavy curtains that trapped decades of secrets, and above all, she listened. The maids talked while folding linens as white as snow, while polishing silver that rarely saw guests, while preparing meals that went up on trays to the south wing and returned almost untouched. Sophie, the youngest, only 19, and with eyes too large for her small face, was the first to mention what everyone whispered but no one said aloud. The Count came back broken from Paris, you know, she said while they tidied the library on a drizzly afternoon. They say he spent 6 months in the military hospital. When he returned in July of 71, he barely looked human. Berthe, older and more cautious, shot her a warning look. But Sophie, too young to understand the weight of silence, continued. The burns? My God, the burns. They say half his face melted. A gunpowder explosion during the siege. Père Jacques saw him when he arrived. Said it looked like they'd ripped his soul out along with his skin. Emily kept her eyes down, her fingers running along the spines of books on botany and medicine. There, among the volumes of ancient knowledge, she felt her sister's presence. Marguerite loved books. Loved to learn. According to the letters, she had obtained special permission to use the library, unheard of for a servant. And the girl, the one who ran away, Emily ventured, keeping her tone casual. Marguerite, wasn't it? The silence that followed had a texture. Sophie looked at Berthe, who looked at the door as if the walls had ears. We don't speak of her, Berthe said finally, her voice low and firm. Madame Girard forbids it. But she hesitated, something like sadness crossing her work-worn face. She wasn't like they say. She wasn't a thief. Always in the greenhouse, always making tinctures and salves, smelled of lavender and rosemary. She had a healer's hands, I used to say, hands that soothed. She had permission to use the greenhouse. Emily pressed gently. Not just permission. The Count gave her access to everything. The library, the greenhouse, the private gardens. Sophie lowered her voice even more. They say she saved him. That when the doctors gave up, she brought him back from the threshold of death with her herbs and spells. They weren't spells, you fool, Berthe snapped. It was knowledge. Ancient women's knowledge. The kind that male doctors despise but that works when their science fails. Emily felt tears sting her eyes but held them back. That was Marguerite. Always healing, always caring, always using the knowledge passed down by her mother, her grandmother, her great-grandmother. A line of women who healed with roots and leaves, who knew the secrets the earth kept. That night, alone in her room, Emily reread her sister's last letter for the 100th time. February 1874, 2 months before her disappearance. My dearest Emily, the winter here has a beauty that breaks the heart. The Count is better. His nightmares have lessened. His strength returns like spring after a long winter. I found Lady Marie's secret garden. Oh, sister, if you could see it. Roses with petals so dark they seem to absorb the light itself. It is there the Countess kept her secrets. There she cultivated the knowledge that men fear in women. The answers are where the black roses grow. Remember this. I have fears I cannot name in these lines. There are eyes that must not read, ears that must not hear. But know that if something happens, you will know where to look. The garden holds more than flowers. With all my love, Marguerite. Emily folded the letter against her chest. Outside, the rain intensified, beating against the window panes like impatient fingers. And then, through the curtain of water, she saw it. A light in the greenhouse, a solitary figure moving among the plants, a tall shadow holding a lantern that turned the glass into a luminous cathedral. Her heart leaped. It was impossible. No one went to the greenhouse at this hour. The maids finished their work at sunset, and yet there was someone, watering plants in the night rain in a vigil that seemed ritualistic. Emily didn't think, she just moved. She wrapped herself in a dark shawl, slipped off her boots so as not to make noise in the stone corridors, and glided through the sleeping house like a ghost seeking its own past. The gardens were soaked, earth turning to mud beneath her bare feet. The cold rain stuck her dress to her skin, but she barely felt it. All her consciousness narrowed to that point of light ahead, to the greenhouse that held her sister's secrets. The glass door was ajar. Emily pushed it open and stepped inside. The humid warmth enveloped her immediately, a dense smell of wet earth, of growing leaves, of insistent life. Between the wooden benches filled with pots and beds, a figure turned, and Emily saw Count Henry de Valmont for the first time. He was tall, perhaps a hand taller than her, and the right side of his face retained the aristocratic beauty of the portrait in the hall. A pronounced cheekbone, a strong jaw, grey-blue eyes that now stared at her with surprise and something else she couldn't name. But the left side looked as if it had been licked by dragons. The skin was a landscape of scars, red and contracted, pulling the corner of his mouth into a permanent, bitter half-smile. Where an ear should have been, there remained only a residue of twisted flesh. His hair grew unevenly, interrupted by patches of burned scalp. Emily did not look away, not out of courage, but because she saw beyond the scars. She saw the pain that lived in those eyes as a permanent guest. She saw the loneliness that made him water plants in the middle of the night, in a storm, as if seeking companionship in living things that had no voice to scream at his appearance. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but his voice lacked authority. It was hoarse, worn, like violin strings stretched too tight. "Neither should you, I imagine," Emily replied before she could censure herself. Then more softly, "I beg your pardon. I saw the light and—" "A lie." He placed the metal watering can on the bench, a slow, deliberate movement. "You didn't just see the light. You're looking for something, or someone." Emily's heart stumbled in its own rhythm. He took 2 steps toward her, the lantern light dancing on his face, divided between beauty and tragedy. "You have her eyes," Henri said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The same brown eyes with that golden ring around the pupil. Eyes that see beyond the surface. Émilie Rousseau, I presume?" She backed away, but the glass door was at her back. She was trapped between flight and truth. "How?" "Marguerite spoke of you, always. Her younger sister who wanted to study plants like her, who had inherited her mother's healing hands." He stopped just a few feet away. "She used to come here every night. She said the plants healed better under the moon, that there was magic in the dark hours when the world stopped screaming." Tears burned in Emily's eyes. Marguerite. Her Marguerite. Alive in these words, in these memories. What happened to her? The words came out as a plea. Henri turned away, looking through the fogged glass at the gardens invisible in the darkness. "I don't know. And that ignorance eats at me like rust on iron. One day she was here, smelling of rosemary and laughter. The next, empty, vanished. They said she fled, that she stole family jewels." His hand clenched into a fist. "Lies, all lies. Marguerite would never steal, would never flee. Someone took her away. Someone silenced her. Did you love her?" The question escaped before Emily could stop it. Henri laughed, a broken, humorless sound. "Love? Yes, as one loves the sun after years in a dark cave, as one loves the person who gives you back your humanity when you've already buried it with the dead in Paris." He turned to her, scars shining wetly in the flickering light. "Marguerite saved me when I no longer wanted to be saved. She healed not just my ruined body, but something deeper. And then she disappeared, as if the earth swallowed her." Emily took a step forward, then another, until she stood before him, close enough to see the tears sliding down the intact half of his face, stopping at the border of the scars, as if even sadness respected that raised land. "You came looking for her, didn't you?" Henri asked. "Yes." "Then let us look together." He held out his right hand, not the left, with fingers also marked by burns. "Marguerite deserves justice. She deserves for someone to refuse to believe the convenient lies." Emily looked at that hand, aristocratic, stained with earth from tending plants in their creator's absence. And she took it. "Your sister mentioned a secret garden in the last weeks before. Henri's hand closed around hers, a firm, warm grip. "My late mother's garden, Lady Marie's, a place that remained locked since her death. But Marguerite found it. She said there were black roses there, roses that held secrets." Her mother's book of plants burned in Emily's memory. The roses with petals so dark purple, they looked like solidified night, symbols of feminine mysteries. "I can take you there tomorrow night," Henri continued. "During the day, Armand is at the chateau." "Armand?" My cousin. Heir presumptive, since I have no children nor prospects of having any, considering—" He gestured vaguely at his face. "He stays here for weeks at a time, overseeing the family's business. He distrusts everyone and everything. We must be careful." The rain had lessened outside, reduced to a gentle drumming on the glass roof. Emily slowly released his hand but remained close. "Why would you help me? Why risk your family's wrath?" Henri looked at the plants around them, ferns unfolding in perfect spirals, lavender growing in terracotta pots, rosemary hanging its branches like green fingers reaching for the floor. "Because Marguerite taught me that some things matter more than blood and surname. That dignity doesn't live in titles but in actions. And because," his voice failed him, "because if I couldn't protect her while she was here, the least I can do is honor her by finding the truth." Emily nodded, her throat too tight for words. Then, on an impulse that surprised them both, she lightly touched the burned side of his face. He flinched but didn't pull away. "She saw all of you," Emily said softly. "The scars were just a part of you, not the whole. Never the whole." Henri closed his eyes. A single tear escaped, sliding over the ruined flesh. And there in the glass greenhouse, as the moon bore witness through the scattering clouds, a silent alliance was sealed between two hearts broken by absence. The following night arrived wrapped in mist. Emily waited in her room until the sounds of the chateau quieted to the sighs of old wood and wind in the cracks. Then she slipped through the corridors with the plant book hidden under her shawl, her heart beating a nervous march against her ribs. Henri waited for her at the entrance to the south wing. He wore dark clothes, a scarf partially covering the left side of his face. He held a perforated metal lantern that cast dancing stars on the stone walls. "This way," he murmured, and she followed him through passages that smelled of mildew and forgotten memories. Lady Marie's secret garden was hidden behind the south wing, protected by high, moss-covered brick walls. A rusted iron gate resisted for a moment, before yielding with an agonizing groan. Inside, the mist made everything spectral. Abandoned beds where organized flowers once grew were now an ornamental jungle, shrubs growing wild, vines reclaiming territory. But in the center, illuminated by the moon that had finally conquered the clouds, was a circular bed, and there the roses grew. Emily let out a muffled gasp. The petals were such a deep purple that in the silvery light they looked black, each flower a small knight in bloom. They grew in disarray, as if a long-departed Lady Marie still nurtured them with love from the other side of the veil. "Here." Henri knelt beside the largest rosebush, his fingers pushing away the damp earth. "Marguerite said she buried something important, something that needed to be preserved." They worked together, digging with small garden trowels Henri had brought. The earth yielded easily, having been disturbed not long ago. 6 inches down, Emily's fingers touched metal. A tin box, the kind used for biscuits or documents. She lifted it with trembling hands, wiped away the clinging dirt and opened it. Inside, protected by oiled cloth, were Marguerite's notebooks. Emily recognized the handwriting immediately, that elegant, precise script her sister had developed by copying texts on medicine and botany. There were 3 notebooks, each filled with detailed illustrations of plants, carefully noted recipes, and observations on healing properties. But it was the last notebook, the smallest and most intimate, that made Emily's heart stop. "A diary." "Read," Henri said softly. "She kept this here for a reason. She wanted it to be found." Emily opened to the first page, and Marguerite's voice resurfaced from the dry words. "September 1871. I arrived today at Chateau Bellerive as a chambermaid. They say the young count returned from the war more dead than alive, that he refuses visitors, and wastes away in the south wing like a spectre in his own haunting. The doctors have declared him a lost cause, a combination of physical wounds and maladies of the soul that official medicine cannot cure. But I know of other medicines my mother taught me, that her mother taught her, an unbroken line of women who healed when doctors failed. I will take this job not for the pay, but for the chance to use the knowledge that runs in my blood like sap in a living tree." Emily turned the pages, reading aloud to Henri, who listened motionlessly. "The moon bathing his scars in liquid silver. October 1871. I was finally allowed into the south wing. The count was... My God, the burns are extensive, but it is the weight in his eyes that is most frightening. The weight of one who has seen things that broke something fundamental inside him. The doctors pump him full of laudanum and mercury, poisons that kill him more slowly than the wounds. I offered to prepare poultices. Madame Girard resisted, but the Count, in a moment of lucidity, agreed. "It cannot be worse than what I already endure," he said. The following pages documented the treatment. Marguerite described valerian tinctures to calm, willow bark decoctions for pain, arnica and comfrey poultices for the scars. She also described the nightly conversations. When the laudanum lost its grip, and Henri spoke of the things he had seen in besieged Paris, of men dying of hunger, of children eating rats, of the day the gunpowder exploded, turning his face to molten flesh. November 1871, he is improving, not just the body, the soul. Yesterday he laughed at a joke I made about my attempts to read the medical books in the library's Latin. It was a small, broken laugh, but real. I felt as if I had witnessed a miracle. She saved me, Henri murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion. She literally brought me back from the dead. Emily continued reading, flipping through months of entries, the relationship deepening, conversations about botany and philosophy, comfortable silences in the greenhouse as they tended the plants together, and then inevitably love. Love that had grown slowly like a rosebush, setting roots before daring to bloom. December 1873. Henri asked me to marry him. Not officially, not yet. He knows society would never accept it. But in his quarters alone he knelt, with difficulty as his legs still ache, and offered me his mother's simple ring. I cannot promise social acceptance, he said, but I can promise absolute fidelity, infinite respect and a love that transcends scars, mine and the invisible ones of the world. I accepted. I am happy, recklessly, impossibly but irreversibly happy. But the tone changed in the entries from January 1874. Joy gave way to worry, then alarm, finally to fear. Emily turned the page, her fingers trembling in the uncertain light of the lantern. Marguerite's handwriting, always so precise, was beginning to grow ragged, as if written in haste or under growing stress. January 1874. Henri is getting worse. At first I thought it was a reaction to the New Year's festivities. Too much effort, too much stimulation. But the symptoms are not subsiding. Severe abdominal pain, tremors in his hands, fatigue that makes him sleep 16 hours a day. He has regressed a full year in a matter of weeks. I increase the dosages of the natural remedies. Nothing, he worsens daily. I am beginning to suspect this is not a relapse. It is something new, something intentional. Henri inhaled sharply. Emily paused, looked at him, saw a pallor take over even the burned parts of his face. Continue, he urged, his voice strangled. January 18th, 1874. I tested samples of the wine Henri drinks every night, a special port, a gift from his cousin Armand, who arrived from Paris in December. I used Marsh's reagent, a test I learned from the chemistry books in the library. The result was unequivocal: white arsenic. In small doses administered gradually, a patient assassin's poison. Armand is killing Henri. The silence that followed had a physical weight. Henri rose abruptly, moving a few steps away as if he needed distance from the words. His hands were shaking. My cousin, my own blood. There's more, Emily said gently, continuing to read. January 22nd, 1874. I have documented everything. Dates, symptoms, samples preserved in amber. I showed the evidence to Henri. He was devastated but not surprised. He said Armand had always envied him, ever since childhood, that he had waited for Henri to die in the war, that he was furious when he survived. We plan to expose him legally with the authorities, but we need time to build an irrefutable case. I am hiding the evidence here in Lady Marie's secret garden. If something happens to me, let them serve as a testament. Emily turned more pages. The entries became more spaced out, more tense. Marguerite described cautious conversations, suspicious glances from Armand, a growing feeling of being watched. And then the last entry. March 5th, 1874. Emily had to pause, take a deep breath before reading it aloud. March 5th, 1874. I confronted Armand today. A fatal mistake. I found him in the cellar handling bottles of wine. When he saw that I knew, he didn't feign innocence. He simply smiled. The smile of a viper that knows it has cornered the mouse. Marguerite, he said in that poisoned velvet voice, a maid too clever for her own good. Henri always had a weakness for broken things. Mutilated soldiers, sick plants, women of dubious origin. I replied that I had proof, that the authorities would know. He laughed. Proof, he said. You are a servant, a nobody's daughter. Who will believe you against a Valmont? But I am generous. Take this money, disappear, and we all live. Refuse. He didn't need to complete the threat. I refused. I spat at his aristocratic feet and said I would rather die than let him kill Henri. That can be arranged, he replied. I fled. I'm hiding these words now while I still have time. If you read this, Emily, my dear sister, who I know will come looking for me, know this. Henri is innocent of everything. He is a victim, not a villain. Armand is the monster, Dr. Laurent, the physician from Lyon, is his accomplice. It was he who supplied the arsenic. The proof is in the chapel, under the stones of the weeping angel. Save Henri as I could not save myself. With all my eternal love, Marguerite. The last sentence was blurred, as if tears had fallen on the still wet ink. Emily closed the notebook, hugging it to her chest. The black roses around them seemed silent witnesses to the tragedy that had unfolded in this very garden months ago. Henri remained with his back to her, his shoulders bowed under the weight of the revelation. She died because of me, he said finally, his voice breaking. She died protecting me. No. Emily stood, moved toward him. She died because your cousin is a cowardly murderer. The guilt is not yours. Henri turned, and Emily saw something new in his eyes, fury, not hot, explosive anger, but the cold, calculated rage of one who had just found purpose. The chapel, he said. She mentioned the chapel. We must go now. It's the middle of the night. Armand is in Paris until tomorrow. He'll only return for dinner. We have hours. Henri grabbed the lantern. If the proof is where Marguerite indicated, we need to retrieve it before Armand discovers you are searching. Emily nodded. She put the notebooks back in the metal box, hid it again under the earth and roses. Then she followed Henri through the misty gardens toward the stone chapel that stood like a somber sentinel at the far east end of the grounds. The door creaked on its medieval hinges. Inside it smelled of old incense and cold stone. Stained glass windows awaited the sun to come alive, now just shadows of color in the darkness. At the far end, above the altar, a marble statue dominated, a weeping angel, hands covering its face, wings folded in a posture of eternal mourning. There, Henri pointed to the pedestal where the angel rested. Help me move it. They worked together, muscles straining against the weight of centuries. The statue resisted, then yielded with a groan of stone against stone. It revealed a niche carved into the base, a dark space where something awaited discovery. Henri plunged his hand in and pulled out a package wrapped in oiled leather. Inside they found the final truth. Henri's fingers trembled as he untied the oiled leather cords. The lantern light danced on the chapel walls, turning stone saints into flickering witnesses. Emily held her breath as the package opened, revealing its deadly contents. Amber glass vials, each carefully labeled with a date and content, samples of wine, water, tea, all taken from Henri's quarters between January and March 1874. Beside them, smaller test tubes containing dark precipitates, the results of the chemical tests Marguerite had performed. But it was the letters that made Emily's blood run cold. Correspondence between Armand de Valmont and Dr. Antoine Laurent, written in careful but unmistakable language. They spoke of prolonged treatment and gradually increased dosages. They discussed expected symptoms and satisfactory progression. In one of the last ones, dated February 1874, Laurent wrote, "My dear Armand, the patient is responding as predicted. 3 more months of this administration, and the outcome will be natural. No one will suspect poisoning. All will believe his war wounds have finally taken their toll." Henri let the letter fall as if it burned him. He leaned against the altar, breathing heavily. 3 years, he murmured. 3 years planning my death, waiting patiently while I suffered. Emily picked up the last letter, still sealed. She recognized Marguerite's handwriting on the envelope, addressed to herself but never sent. "May I?" she asked Henri. He nodded, unable to speak. Emily broke the wax seal and read, her low voice echoing among the sacred stones. "My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, I am already gone. Armand offered me money to flee and be silent. I refused. I cannot let Henri die when I have the power to stop it. Tonight, March 5th, he will come, I feel it. I see the decision made in his snake's eyes. I am hiding this proof for you because I know you will come looking. You were always braver than I, little sister. Dr. Laurent is an accomplice. He provided the poison, guided the doses, and was paid well for his silence. I have letters that prove everything. I have samples that any competent chemist can analyze. Henri is innocent of everything. He is the purest victim I have ever known. A soldier broken by war, then poisoned by his own blood. If I do not survive tonight, I beg you save him. Show him this proof. Stop Armand from winning. And if you can, tell him I died loving him. That the months we spent together were the happiest of my life. That I regret nothing, except not having more time. Your sister who loves you forever, Marguerite P.S. The black roses from Lady Marie's garden. Plant one in my memory, so that something beautiful may be born from this sadness." Emily finished reading, tears streaming freely down her face. She folded the letter reverently, held it against her heart. Henri had approached in silence, and now he was so close she could see tears shining in his mismatched eyes as well. "She knew," he said, his voice broken. She knew she was going to die, and still she chose to protect me. Because she loved you. Emily touched his arm gently, and true love doesn't calculate risks. It just acts. A soft sound made them both freeze. Footsteps on the stone path outside, the light of a lamp approaching. Someone is coming, Emily whispered. Henri moved quickly despite his physical limitations. He hid the packet of evidence inside the robe he was wearing, helped Emily push the angel statue back into its original position. They finished seconds before the chapel door swung open. Père Jacques entered, lamp held high, his wrinkled face expressing surprise at seeing them. Count Henry, ma'am, what are you doing in the chapel at this hour? The old groundskeeper was 70 if he was a day, his body bent from decades of tending the castle gardens and buildings. But there was something in his eyes, fear, guilt, that made Emily narrow her own. Père Jacques, Henri spoke with natural authority despite the moment. We could ask you the same. You don't usually come to the chapel before dawn. The old man hesitated. His fingers tightened on the lamp's handle, the force whitening his knuckles. I can't sleep, he said finally. For months, since March. The silence that followed was pregnant with meaning. Emily stepped forward. What happened in March, Père Jacques? The old man looked between her and Henri, a visible war taking place on his wrinkled face. Then, like a dam breaking, the words poured out. I saw. May God forgive me, I saw, and I said nothing. I was afraid. I have family in the village, young grandchildren. Armand said if I spoke. What did you see? Henri grabbed the old man by the shoulders, not with brutality, but with urgency. Père Jacques, I need to know. The groundskeeper collapsed, literally his legs giving way, forcing Henri to catch him before he fell. Emily brought a wooden stool and they helped him sit. The lamp nearly fell from his trembling hands. The night of March 7th, he began, his voice hoarse with emotion held back for months. I was in the garden shed, insomnia as I always have. I saw Armand and that doctor from Lyon, Dr. Laurent. They were carrying something wrapped in canvas, something the size of a person. Emily felt the blood freeze in her veins. Henri let out a sound that was part groan, part the roar of a wounded animal. Where? He asked in a voice of steel. Where did they take her? The North Woods. Near the old abandoned mill. Père Jacques lifted tormented eyes. They dug there. It took hours. When they left, they threatened me. Said if I spoke, my grandchildren would suffer. That accidents happen to children. That fire can devastate a wooden house in minutes. The old man covered his face with his hands, sobs shaking his frail body. I am a coward. I am vile. I left that poor girl without a Christian burial, without justice, without... I haven't slept since. I see her face every night. Those kind eyes that always had a smile for an old gardener. Emily knelt before him, taking his wrinkled hands. You are not a coward. You protected your family. Anyone would have done the same. She looked at Henri. But now you can help us. You can give Marguerite what she deserves. Henri nodded, determination hardening his features. Tomorrow, Armand returns for dinner. We will have a conversation. Their final conversation. He glanced at the proof hidden beneath his clothes, and this time, he will be the one to drink his own poison. The next 2 days unfolded in meticulous preparation. Henri sent discreet messages to Paris, to Magistrate Jean Deschamps, an old friend of his late father, a man known for his inflexible integrity. He briefly explained the situation, asking for his presence at Bellerive under the pretext of discussing legal matters of the inheritance. Emily, for her part, copied every letter, every note, every piece of evidence Marguerite had compiled. She worked at night in her room by candlelight, her fingers stained with ink, as she reproduced proof that could not be lost. Her mother's plant book rested open beside her, as if her female ancestors were guiding her hand. Madame Girard noticed the tension in the castle. She asked Emily if something was wrong, if the Count was ill again. Emily kept her face serene, lying that she was just adapting to the work. But she saw suspicion in the housekeeper's eyes. That woman hadn't survived decades serving nobles without developing an instinct for trouble. On the afternoon of the third day, Armand de Valmont arrived from Paris. Emily saw him for the first time during the dinner she served in the formal dining room. He was tall like Henri, but where his cousin carried the weight of trauma and scars, Armand exuded a predatory confidence. Dark hair perfectly combed, impeccably cut suits, expensive rings gleaming on fingers that had never worked. Conventionally handsome, without the marks that made Henri unique, but it was his eyes that revealed his nature. Cold, calculating, the eyes of a snake assessing the distance to the mouse. Cousin, Armand embraced Henri with false enthusiasm. I see you are well. Even recovered, I'd say. Unexpected considering the reports Dr. Laurent has been sending me. Yes, Henri replied, his voice neutral. "It seems I found an unexpected cure. Sometimes traditional medicine fails where ancient remedies triumph." Something passed over Armand's face. So quickly, Emily almost missed it. "Suspicion, alarm, ancient remedies," he repeated, picking up a wine glass. "Don't tell me you've resorted to sorceresses and charlatans. Let's just say I've learned to distrust well-intentioned gifts." Henri raised his own glass in a toast that seemed innocent but carried an invisible poison. "To family, cousin. May the ties of blood always be stronger than ambition." Armand drank, but his eyes never left Henri's face. Emily, serving in silence, felt the tension stretch between the two men like barbed wire. The dinner proceeded with superficial conversation about the estate's business, politics in Paris, the price of wine in the current vintage. But beneath the polite surface, a silent war was being waged. Armand probing for weakness, Henri maintaining an impenetrable mask. As Emily was clearing the dessert plates, Armand suddenly said, "This maid is new, isn't she? I don't recall seeing her before." "She arrived a few weeks ago," Henri answered casually. "Excellent references from Dijon. Madame Girard selected her." Armand looked at Émilie for the first time truly. She kept her head down, the submissive posture of a servant, but she felt that reptilian gaze travel over her like cold hands. "Interesting," he murmured. "There's something familiar about her. The eyes, perhaps." "All peasants have similar eyes," Henri cut in, perhaps too abruptly. "Hard work and little rest create certain resemblances." Emily left before Armand could study her further. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, her heart pounding. He suspected. Maybe he didn't know exactly what, but that man hadn't gotten where he was by being a fool. They needed to act quickly. That night, when the castle slept, Henri came to Emily's room. He brought news. "Magistrate Deschamps will arrive tomorrow at noon. I have planned a formal dinner for the evening, a perfect occasion. Armand cannot refuse without raising suspicion, and we will have a legal witness for everything we reveal." "He's dangerous," Emily warned. "I saw it today." "He suspects." "I know. Which is why I've taken precautions." Henri showed her a small glass vial, an antidote that Marguerite prepared. "In case he tries to poison me again during dinner," and he hesitated. "I've taken the liberty of reversing the situation." "What do you mean?" A dark smile crossed Henri's divided face. "The special wine Armand brought as a gift is still in the cellar. I plan to serve it, but only to him. I will let him drink his own poison. Poetic justice, don't you think?" Emily should have felt shock. She should have argued against stooping to the murderer's level. But when she thought of Marguerite, of her brave, brilliant sister buried like an animal in the woods, she felt only a cold satisfaction. "How much is in the wine?" "According to Marguerite's notebooks, enough to cause severe symptoms, but not immediate death. He will suffer as he made me suffer. And when he confesses before the magistrate, we will have not only documentary proof, but a verbal admission of guilt. And Dr. Laurent, he will also come. I've invited him under the pretext of discussing my treatment. He doesn't know Deschamps will be present. Neither of them knows the trap is set." Emily nodded slowly. It was risky. So many things could go wrong. But she looked at the plant book on her dresser, at the copies of Marguerite's letters, at her sister's last message promising she regretted nothing. "Tomorrow, then," she said. "Justice for Marguerite." Henri took her hand, squeezed it gently. "Justice for Marguerite," he repeated, "and may she forgive us for using her methods against them." He left silently. Emily stayed awake until dawn, praying to gods she half believed in, asking for strength for the day to come, the day when the truth would finally have a voice. September 29th, 1874, the feast of St. Michael the Archangel. The date was fitting, Emily thought as she helped prepare the grand hall. St. Michael, the warrior angel who defeated Lucifer, appropriate for a night when another kind of demon would be confronted. Henri had organized everything as a traditional regional ball, an ancient custom the Valmonts had maintained for generations. It would be expected for him to attend, and his public presence after months of seclusion would generate enough commotion to ensure everyone's attention. When he descended the main staircase that night, the murmur of the small invited crowd ceased abruptly. Henri wore perfectly tailored formal attire, his dark hair combed back, but he wore no mask or scarf to hide his scars. He presented himself completely exposed, the intact side and the destroyed side, both illuminated by hundreds of candles that turned the hall into a golden cathedral. Emily, serving champagne on the periphery, felt pride tighten her chest. Here was a man who had survived war, poisoning, and grief, and still maintained an unshakable dignity. Armand arrived with Dr. Laurent, both visibly surprised by the scene. His cousin quickly masked his expression, replacing it with a polite smile. Laurent, a man of 50 with a severe appearance and eternally suspicious eyes, seemed less comfortable. "Cousin," Armand approached, "what a wonderful surprise. To see you like this, restored, among society." "I decided I had hidden long enough," Henri replied, accepting greetings from other guests. "Life goes on, doesn't it? Even for war monsters like me." "You are no monster," said a firm voice. Magistrate Jean Deschamps had materialized at Henri's side. Tall, his hair completely white, he had a bearing that inspired immediate respect. Emily had met him earlier when he arrived discreetly. Henri had introduced her not as a maid, but as the sister of a possible crime victim, a validation that had almost made her cry. "De Deschamps," Armand extended his hand, but something in his eyes revealed discomfort. "I didn't expect to see you here. Were the legal matters you mentioned so urgent?" "I am always punctual when justice is involved," the magistrate replied, shaking Armand's hand with a force that made the younger man wince. Dinner was served at a long oak table. 25 guests, including local nobles, the village parish priest and Dr. Beaumont, an honest physician Henri had chosen as a counterpoint to Laurent. Emily and the other maids served as conversations flowed about harvests, politics, and social gossip, but she barely heard. All her attention was focused on the wine bottles being circulated. Henri had given precise instructions. Everyone would receive common Bordeaux wine, except Armand. For him, a special bottle was reserved, the very port he had gifted months ago, the one Marguerite had detected arsenic in. When the moment came, Henri rose to make a toast. "Friends," his voice filled the hall, "I thank you all for your presence on this special night. I have spent too long in the shadows, letting wounds, physical and otherwise, define me. But I have learned something important. Truth has the power to heal. And tonight, under the witness of St. Michael, I intend to honor some important truths." He looked directly at Armand. "Cousin, you brought me a generous gift a few months ago. A rare port wine, you said. I saved it for a special occasion." Henri signaled, and Emily approached with the distinct bottle. "How about we toast with it together? Family should share the best things, no?" Armand hesitated. For a second, his mask slipped, revealing something that looked like alarm. But he was surrounded by society, by witnesses. To refuse would be an inexplicable insult. "Of course," he said, his voice only slightly tense. "It would be an honor." Emily served them both, but as she did, a discreet movement switched the glasses. Henri, who was watching closely, gave her the slightest nod. "To family," Henri raised his glass. "May the ties of blood always be stronger than personal ambitions." They drank. Emilie held her breath, watching Armand swallow a generous amount of the poisoned wine. At first, nothing. The conversation resumed. Main courses were served, but then, 15 minutes later, Armand paused mid-sentence. He passed a hand over his face, suddenly pale. "Are you all right?" Henri asked, his false concern perfectly modulated. "Yes, Armand grabbed a napkin, wiped his forehead where sweat was beginning to gather. "Just a sudden warmth. Nothing serious." But it got worse. 10 minutes later, he was bending over slightly, a hand pressed to his abdomen. Dr. Laurent leaned in, whispering something. Armand shook his head, trying to maintain composure. He couldn't. 20 minutes after drinking the wine, he began to tremble visibly. His face turned from pale to grey, sweat soaking his fine clothes. He tried to stand and staggered. "Doctor," Beaumont, Henri called the honest physician, "please examine my cousin. He seems gravely ill." Beaumont approached, his experienced hands feeling Armand's pulse, observing his pupils, asking questions. His face hardened. "These symptoms," he murmured, "they are consistent with poisoning. Arsenic specifically." The silence that fell over the hall was absolute. All eyes turned to Armand, who was now genuinely terrified, his body betraying him just as he had betrayed Henri for months. "Poisoning?" Henri rose, his perfectly rehearsed indignation coloring his voice. "How can that be? We drank from the same wine." "Not the same," Emily heard herself say, surprising even herself. Everyone turned to her. "Forgive me, gentlemen, but I served, and I switched the glasses." Armand looked at her with pure hatred. "You," he tried to speak, but a new wave of nausea bent him over again. "Magistrate Deschamps," Henri turned to the judge, "I believe the time has come for the truth." The hall had transformed into an impromptu courtroom. Guests were politely but firmly asked to remain, necessary witnesses for what was to come. Dr. Laurent had tried to flee when he realized what was happening, but two servants loyal to Henri blocked the doors. Armand was placed in a chair, his body betrayed by his own poison. He was trembling violently, his face bathed in sweat, but his eyes retained that reptilian coldness. Even sick, he was planning, calculating. "This is absurd," he managed to say between spasms. "You are accusing me of what exactly?" Henri placed the oiled leather package on the table. With deliberate movements, he removed the letters, the sample vials, Marguerite's notebooks. Each piece of evidence was the weight of a mountain on the scales of justice. "Of attempting to murder me through progressive poisoning," Henri said, his voice echoing in the silent hall. "Of conspiring with Dr. Laurent to administer arsenic for months, and of murdering Marguerite Rousseau when she discovered your crime." A collective gasp went through the guests. Armand tried to stand, but the pain doubled him over again. There is no proof. There is an abundance of proof." Magistrate Deschamps picked up the letters, examining them with the trained eye of decades interpreting legal documents. "This is correspondence between you and Dr. Laurent explicitly discussing prolonged treatment and dosages." He looked at the doctor, who had turned deathly pale. "Dr. Laurent, do you recognize your own handwriting?" Laurent opened his mouth, then closed it. Sweat shone on his forehead. Finally, after a long pause, I demand my lawyer. I will say nothing without." "We are not asking you to say anything," Henri interrupted. "The letters speak for themselves, but there is more." He held up the amber vials. "Samples of wine, tea and water taken from my quarters, all contaminated with arsenic. Marguerite Rousseau, a talented healer, tested them using Marsh's reagent. Any competent chemist can verify it." "A servant," Armand spat the words. "You're going to believe a servant?" "We will believe science, Doctor," Beaumont said, picking up one of the vials. "I can test this right now if you wish. Marsh's reagent does not lie." "And there is additional testimony," Henri continued. He signaled, and Père Jacques was brought in. The old gardener entered, trembling but determined. "Père Jacques, please tell the magistrate what you saw on the night of March 7th. The old groundskeeper repeated his story, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. He described the canvas, the cart, Armand and Laurent carrying a body into the North Woods. He described the threats, the forced silence, the months of torment. Armand was cornered. You could see it in his eyes. The frantic calculation, searching for an escape where there was none. The poison was weakening him, his muscles betraying him, but his mind still fought. And then, surprisingly, he laughed. It was a horrible, broken laugh, the sound of a man who recognizes complete defeat. He bent over, vomited violently on the marble floor, and when he raised his face, something had changed. The mask was completely gone. "Antidote," he rasped. "Give me the antidote and I'll confess everything." Henri exchanged a look with Emily. She nodded imperceptibly. She brought the small vial, the remedy Marguerite had prepared, carefully preserved among her recipes. Henri held it in front of Armand like bait. "Confession first. Complete and without omissions. Before the magistrate and all these witnesses." Armand swallowed, as much from physical necessity as resignation. Then, in a voice choked with pain but clear in its malice, he began, "Yes, I poisoned you. For months. Since January." Another wave of nausea shook him. "I hoped you would die in the war. When you came back broken, I thought it was only a matter of time. But that damned servant healed you. Healed you when you should have died. Marguerite had nothing to do with your ambitions," Henri said, his voice dangerously low. "She found out. She saw the wine, tested it, wanted to expose me. I offered her money, silence, anything. She refused." Armand spat blood mixed with bile. So Laurent and I took care of the problem. The night of March 7th, we ambushed her in the garden. Laurent administered chloroform. She died in minutes. No struggle. Almost gentle considering. Emily had to grip the table. To hear it described like that, Marguerite's death reduced to taking care of the problem, burned like acid on an open wound. "Where is the body?" Magistrate Deschamps asked, meticulously writing everything down. "Northwards, near the old mill. 2 meters deep." Armand looked at Henri with hatred still burning in his grey eyes. "Everything would have been perfect if you had just died as planned. The estate would be mine. The title mine. Everything that should have always been mine." "Why?" Henri asked, and for the first time real emotion cracked his controlled voice. "I always treated you as a brother. I gave you management of the business, trusted you with everything. Because you were the favorite," Armand shouted, then groaned as pain exploded in his abdomen. The firstborn son, the golden heir. while I, the younger brother's son, was left in the shadows, watching you get everything. Love, attention, property, the title. I waited for you to die in the war, and when you didn't, I decided to help fate along. A heavy silence fell. Even the sounds of breathing seemed too loud. Magistrate Deschamps closed his notebook. Armand de Valmont, in the name of French law, I arrest you for attempted murder and for the murder of Marguerite Rousseau. He looked at Dr. Laurent. You as well, doctor. Complicity in both crimes. Laurent collapsed, sobbing, babbling incoherent excuses. But Armand just continued to stare at Henri with that venomous hatred. Antidote, he demanded again. Henri approached. He held the vial before his fallen cousin. For a moment, Emilie thought he would refuse, that he would let Armand suffer as he had made Henri suffer, as he had killed Marguerite. But Henri was better than that. He always had been. He handed over the vial. Armand drank it greedily, liquid spilling from the corners of his mouth. Then he fell back in the chair, breathing heavily, the worst of the crisis slowly passing. Local guards have been called, Deschamps said. We will take both of you into custody tonight. There will be a formal trial in Paris, but with this evidence and a confession before so many witnesses, the outcome is certain. The guillotine, someone murmured among the guests. Emilie felt no satisfaction in that. Only emptiness, the space where Marguerite should have been. Henri approached her, touched her shoulder gently. Tomorrow, he said quietly. Tomorrow we will go to the woods. We will give her the rest she deserves. Emilie nodded, unable to speak, tears finally overflowing. The night of St. Michael was over. The dragon had been defeated, but victory tasted of ashes. The North Woods dawned shrouded in mist. Authorities from Paris arrived with the first light, bringing excavation teams and an official medical examiner. Magistrate Deschamps supervised personally, ensuring everything was done with dignity and legal precision. Emilie waited at the edge of the clearing where the old mill stood, its stone ruins covered in ivy. Henri was at her side, his hand finding hers in a gesture of mutual comfort. Père Jacques accompanied them, a rosary slipping through his wrinkled fingers, his lips moving in silent prayer. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of digging into the damp earth, while the sun fought to penetrate the persistent mist. And then, one of the men paused, his shovel hitting something that was not stone or root. Here, he called out. Emilie closed her eyes, breathed deep, then forced herself to look. The canvas was partially decayed, but what it contained remained sadly preserved by the cold soil. The medical examiner worked with reverence, slowly exposing the remains. When he finished, he confirmed, body of a young woman, age consistent with 26 years, reasonable preservation. Cause of death, he examined carefully. Asphyxiation, likely from chloroform administered in a lethal dose. Is there anything to identify her? Deschamps asked. The doctor pointed to the body's neck. There, oxidized but intact, hung a silver locket. Henri approached, examined it with trembling hands. He opened it. Inside, 2 small paintings, an older woman and a young girl. Below, a delicate inscription, MRO, Mother and Emilie, always in my heart. It's her, Henri said, his voice broken. It's Marguerite. Emilie let out a sob. The full weight of the past months, the entire search, all the pain crashed down on her. Henri held her as she wept, her tears soaking his shirt, years of repression finally released. We will take her home, Henri said to the officials. She will have a wake in the family chapel, be buried in the private cemetery with full honors, not as a servant but as someone I loved and who saved my life. No one protested. The story had spread through the region. The brave healer who died defending the truth, the count who sought justice for her. It had become something larger than a social scandal. It had become a legend of dignity over hierarchy. Marguerite's body was transported with reverent care. Emilie accompanied the carriage back to the chateau, never leaving its side, as if afraid her sister might disappear again if she looked away. In the chapel, they prepared her with a respect she had never received in life. They washed the body, dressed her in a simple but clean dress, arranged what remained of her blonde hair. Emilie placed flowers around her, lavender and rosemary, Marguerite's favorite plants. The perfume filled the chapel like a blessing. The wake lasted 2 days. The entire village came to pay their respects. Old women Marguerite had healed with her tinctures, children whose fevers she had broken with poultices, men whose war wounds she had treated when doctors gave up. Each one brought a story, a memory, a testament to her forgotten kindness. The local priest, Père Michel, conducted the funeral service. He spoke of courage, of sacrifice, of a love that transcends death. His sermon did not mention social hierarchy or position, only humanity. Marguerite Rousseau died defending the truth. he said before the gathered assembly. She died so that injustice would not triumph. Is there any greater holiness than this? Jesus taught us that the greatest love is to lay down one's life for one's friends. Marguerite lived and died by that principle. They buried her at sunset on the second day. The Valmont family cemetery had opened its gates, a scandal in itself, a noble allowing a servant on sacred ground. But Henri remained adamant. He bought the adjacent plot of land and declared it an extension of the cemetery, dedicated to faithful servants who transcended service. The headstone was simple but eloquent. Marguerite Rousseau, 1848-1874, healer, guardian of truth. The answers are where the black roses grow. Henri had planned more. In the days following the funeral, he brought architects from Paris. He showed them the grounds near the grave and explained his vision, a small but beautiful mausoleum surrounded by a medicinal garden. Each plant would have a plaque explaining its healing properties, creating a living library of the knowledge Marguerite commanded. It will be a living memorial, he explained to Emily as they looked over the initial drawings. Not just cold stone, but a garden that heals, that teaches, honoring not just her death, but her life and her purpose. Emily touched the sketches with reverent fingers. She saw there not just a tribute to her sister, but the acknowledgement of something greater. Ancestral female knowledge finally validated, preserved, and honored. There is something else, Henri continued more hesitantly. The south wing of the chateau. It's empty, too large for one man. I've been thinking of converting it. A charity hospital, dedicated to herbal medicine and free care for the poor of the region. He looked at her directly. I would like you to run it. As director of the Marguerite Rousseau Institute, Emily blinked, shocked. Director? Her a servant with forged references, the daughter of women with no formal education. I don't have the qualifications. You have the knowledge. You have your mother's book, the recipes passed down for generations. You have Marguerite's notebooks, and you have a healer's heart. Henri held her hands. Formal qualifications are pieces of paper. You have something more important, a true healer's calling. Let me give you the means to exercise it. Let us transform this tragedy into something that saves lives. Tears returned to Emily's eyes. But this time they were different. Not of pain, but of hope being born in a desolate land. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Marguerite would have wanted this. To turn poison into cure, death into new life. Henri smiled, the first true smile she had seen on his scarred face. And in that moment, Emily realized something else was growing between them. Something delicate as a bud after winter, but undeniable. Not replacing Marguerite. Never that. But honoring her through a bond built on her memory, on a shared purpose. We will work together then, Henri said, slowly, building something good from the ashes of evil. It's what she deserves. Emily agreed. And there, before the plans for the institute that would change lives, they sealed a commitment, not of hasty romance, but of a patient partnership that might, with time, blossom into something more. For now it was enough, more than enough. The trial of Armand de Valmont and Dr. Antoine Laurent took place in Paris 2 months later, in December 1874. Magistrate Deschamps presided, the courtroom packed with spectators. The story was too sensational to go unnoticed. A noble poisoning his cousin for an inheritance, a servant murdered for discovering the truth, a forbidden cross-class romance. All the elements of a melodrama, except it was terribly real. Emily did not attend. She couldn't. Henri went, an obligation as the primary victim. He returned a week later, exhausted but relieved. Armand was sentenced to death, he reported with no satisfaction in his voice. The guillotine. Laurent will receive life imprisonment with hard labor in French Guiana. He paused. I feel no victory, only closure, like a door finally shut after banging in the wind for years. The institute was beginning to take shape. Architects worked on converting the south wing, turning private quarters into hospital rooms, a library into a dispensary, a salon into a reception area. The medicinal garden around Marguerite's tomb was growing. Père Jacques had dedicated himself to it as a project of personal redemption, planting each herb with a prayer. Emily immersed herself in the work of cataloguing knowledge. Marguerite's notebooks, her mother's book, additional research in the castle's medical texts. She created a detailed index, plants and their uses, recipes tested for generations, observations on dosages and preparations. Henri supported her in everything. He hired a scribe from Paris to help compile the material into a format that could be printed, distributed. The knowledge would not die with Marguerite. It would live on, spreading like seeds in the wind, The local society reacted with predictable scandal. A former maid running a medical institute? Absurd. But when the first patients began to arrive, old men with arthritis that traditional doctors had given up on, children with persistent coughs, women with pains no one took seriously, and left healed or relieved, the whispers changed their tune. Her hands have the gift, they said, like her sister. The old knowledge. Winter gave way to the spring of 1875. The medicinal garden exploded with life, lavender swaying purple in the wind, rosemary perfuming the air, chamomile opening small white suns to the sky. Emily often sat beside Marguerite's grave, talking to her sister about the Institute's progress, about the lives saved, about the transformation her sacrifice had made possible. Henri would join her sometimes. They sat in comfortable silence, just existing in the space between memory and future. Gradually, inevitably, their hands would find each other, fingers lacing during conversations, shoulders touching as they reviewed plans, glances that lasted a second longer than necessary. 1 year after Emily's arrival at Bellerive, on an autumn afternoon mirroring that first day, Henri found her in the greenhouse, the place where it all began. She was watering plants, her simple dress stained with soil, her hair pinned up in a messy bun. Beautiful not for her appearance, though she was, but for the light she radiated, a light of purpose, of a life lived meaningfully. "Emily," he said, his voice slightly nervous. She turned, smiling. That smile that had become common between them, not of carefree joy, but of deep contentment, the happiness savored by those who have known true sorrow. "Henri, have you come to admire the daffodils? They are starting to bud for next spring." "I came to admire you, actually." He approached, his hands nervously behind his back. "And to ask you a question? Impertinent, perhaps. Certainly controversial." Emily put the watering can down, her heart quickening. She knew that tone. She recognized that posture. "We have lived together for a year," Henri continued. "We have worked side by side, building something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. We have turned pain into healing, loss into legacy. And in the process, I discovered something I did not expect." He paused, his grey-blue eyes fixed on hers. "I have fallen in love with you, not as a replacement for Marguerite, as Emily, unique, extraordinary, indispensable Emily." He knelt, a difficult movement for his still aching legs, and held out a simple gold ring. "I cannot promise immediate social acceptance. A marriage between a count and a former maid will cause a scandal, but I can promise a partnership of equals. Absolute respect, and a love that recognizes your intrinsic worth, independent of any title I might confer." His voice faltered slightly. "Will you marry me? Not to honor me, but to complete me." Emily knelt in front of him, the damp earth staining both their knees. She took his scarred face between her hands. "Yes," she said simply. "1,000 times yes. Not despite who we are, but because of it. Because we have built something real on a foundation of truth and honored memory." He slid the ring onto her finger. Then gently he kissed her. The first kiss for them both, sweet with promise and tempered by all they had survived to get there. When they parted, Emily looked through the greenhouse glass to the garden outside. A golden autumn sky, light pouring over Marguerite's tomb, over the black roses growing around it, and she swore she saw for an instant a figure in a simple dress waving from among the flowers, Marguerite blessing them, approving, releasing them to a happiness she had not lived to experience. When Emily blinked, the figure was gone, but the peace remained. The wedding took place 6 months later, a small ceremony in the castle chapel. Only close friends, loyal servants, Père Jacques, Père Michel. Emily wore a simple blue dress, the color of the sky after a storm. Henri wore dark clothes, no scarf or mask, his scars exposed for all to see. The priest blessed their union, not of noble blood, but of noble souls. The reception was modest, a celebration of a love that needed no ostentation for validation. That night, their first as a married couple, Henri and Emily went to the garden. They planted a new rosebush beside Marguerite's grave, cuttings from the original black roses in Lady Marie's garden. As they did, they spoke to her, thanked her, promised to honor her through the lives they would touch. And then, hand in hand, they walked back to the chateau. No longer count and servant, but husband and wife, partners, healers, guardians of a legacy that turned darkness into light, one saved life at a time. The following years unfolded in a pattern of meaningful work and quiet joy. The Marguerite Rousseau Institute flourished. Emily trained other women, farmers' daughters, widows, anyone with a calling to heal. She taught them the ancient recipes, the methods that large hospitals despised, but that worked when official medicine failed. Henri managed the administration, securing funds, negotiating with skeptical authorities. His social position, despite the scandal of his marriage, still carried weight. He used it for good, pushing for the recognition of herbal medicine, for respect for traditional healers. In 1876, Emily gave birth to a girl. They named her Marie Marguerite de Valmont, honoring both Henri's deceased mother and the sister who had sacrificed everything. The baby had golden hair like Marguerite, brown eyes like Emily, and as she grew, she would develop a passion for plants that seemed to run in her blood. 2 years later, Jacques-Henri arrived, a name honoring both his father and the old gardener who had redeemed himself through a late truth. Père Jacques, now in his 80s but still strong, wept when he heard. He became an adoptive grandfather to the children, teaching them about the earth and growth, about how to care for living things. The medicinal garden around Marguerite's tomb expanded. It became a point of pilgrimage for women seeking healing knowledge. Emily often led classes there, sitting among the herbs with students around her, teaching while butterflies danced over the black roses. My sister believed that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded, she would say. That healing was everyone's right, not the privilege of a few. When you learn these recipes, you become guardians of a tradition that has lived for hundreds of years. Honor it. Use it wisely. Henri would watch from a distance, his heart full in ways he had never imagined possible after the war. Yes, he still had nightmares. Yes, the scars ached on cold days, but he had purpose. A family. Love. The things he had survived for without knowing he was seeking. Ahem. One summer afternoon in 1880, when Marie was 4 and Jacques was 2, Henri found Emily in the garden. She was teaching her daughter about lavender, small hands touching the purple flowers, with a reverence her mother had cultivated. She would have loved you so much, Henri said, knowing Emily would understand he was speaking of Marguerite. She does love them, Emily replied, watching her children play among the plants. From wherever she is, I feel it. Like a warm presence at my back on a cold day. She turned to him. You loved her first. I'm not jealous of that. In fact, I'm grateful, because that love taught you to see beyond surfaces. And when you loved me, it was with a depth that only someone who has known true love knows how to give. Henri wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder as they watched the children. Marie was trying to pick rosemary without breaking the branches. Jacques was smelling a chamomile flower and sneezing comically. Normal scenes, precious precisely because they were common. The Institute saw 200 people this month, Emily commented. 200 lives touched. Some cured, others just relieved, but all of them seen, heard, respected. Marguerite saved much more than just me, Henri murmured. Through you, through the Institute, she continues to save, life after life, generation after generation. It is the truest kind of immortality. Père Jacques approached, moving slowly but still steady in his late 80s. He carried a basket of freshly picked herbs. For tomorrow's tinctures, he said, handing it to Emily. And there's something else. From inside his coat, he pulled out a sheet of paper. I found this today while replanting the roses. It was buried deep, preserved in amber. It looks like a letter. Emily took it with trembling hands. She recognized Marguerite's handwriting immediately. But this was different. Not documentation of a crime or a medical recipe. It was personal, intimate. She opened it, Henri reading over her shoulder. To whoever finds this, if it is ever found, I write on a beautiful day in February 1874, sitting in the secret garden among the roses Lady Marie planted. I suspect my days are numbered. Armand watches me with a predator's eyes, but I do not fear death, only what I leave unfinished. If Henri reads this, you saved me as much as I saved you. You gave me back my humanity when I was lost in the role of an invisible servant. You saw me, truly saw me. For that I thank you beyond words. Live, please live, find happiness. Not in my memory, but beyond it. You deserve a love that remains, not just the ghost of a lost love. If Emily reads this, my brave little sister, I know you will come looking for me. I always knew. Continue the work, the recipes, the knowledge, the healing. Not for me, but for all the women who came before and will come after. We are an unbroken line of healers, stretching back centuries. Keep the line intact. And if you both read this together, wouldn't that be wonderful? Henri finding happiness, Emily using her gifts, perhaps even. But I dare not hope for so much. Just know that from the beyond, whatever it is, I bless any joy you find, particularly if it is in each other. The black roses represent feminine mysteries, but also transformation, beauty born from darkness. May my death, if it comes, be transformed thus. Not as an end, but as the beginning of something beautiful. With all the love a soul can hold, Marguerite P.S., plant roses in my memory and be happy. It is all any loving soul can ask. Emily finished reading with tears running silently. Henry was also crying, without shame or any attempt to hide it. Père Jacques discreetly withdrew, taking the children to leave them alone in their mixed grief and joy. She knew, Emily whispered. Somehow she knew. And she gave us permission. She gave us her blessing. More than that, Henri pointed to the date. This was written weeks before she died. It means that even in the face of imminent death, she was thinking of our future. Our well-being, his voice broke. What kind of love does that? The kind that never truly dies, Emily answered. The kind that lives on in every life we save, in every child we teach, in every plant that grows in this garden. She is here. She always has been. She always will be. They folded the letter with reverence. Emily decided it would be preserved in the Institute, in a special frame next to the portrait of Marguerite that Henri had commissioned, a painting based on descriptions, showing a young woman with golden hair, kind eyes and hands holding lavender. That night, after putting the children to bed, Henri and Emily went to the greenhouse, the place where the truth had begun to emerge so long ago. They watered the plants in silence, a ritual that had become their shared meditation. Do you know what I think sometimes? Henri said, the moonlight pouring through the glass. That Marguerite didn't just save my physical life, she saved my ability to love. Without her, I would have remained a ghost in my own castle. But she reminded me that being broken doesn't mean being dead. That scars are just maps of battles survived. And she gave me you, Emily completed. Through tragedy I found purpose and love. Should I feel guilty about that? For happiness built on her pain? No. Henri turned to her, taking her hands. Because we transformed pain into healing. We did not waste her sacrifice. We honor it in everything we do. It is the greatest tribute possible, Emily agreed. And there, surrounded by plants growing stubbornly toward the moon, they silently renewed their commitment, not just to each other, but to a memory they would never let die. Marguerite's legacy would live on. Through them, through the Institute, through the generations of healers they would train. It would live eternally, perfuming the world like lavender that grows wild and insistent, refusing to be forgotten. Summer 1880. The Marguerite Rousseau Institute was celebrating 5 years of successful operation. Hundreds of people served, dozens of women trained, slow but growing recognition from official medical authorities. Henri and Emily had turned tragedy into tangible triumph. But there was something more, something Emily had not yet discovered. One hot afternoon in July, while organizing Marguerite's old notebooks for a new archiving system, Emily noticed an inconsistency that had always gone unnoticed. Pages were missing between February and March 1874, not torn out violently, but carefully removed, hidden perhaps. She called Henri, showing him the discovery. Missing pages, he said, examining them carefully. But where would they be? They returned to the secret garden, to the spot where they had originally found the notebooks. They dug deeper this time, not just under the main rosebush but around the entire circular bed. And there, buried a foot down, they found a second metal box, inside the missing pages, and a revelation that would change everything they thought they knew. Marguerite had written on these sheets about something she had never mentioned in the other notebooks, something intimate and profound. February 10th, 1874. I discovered today that I carry life within me. Henri's child, conceived in December, on a silent night in the greenhouse when we allowed ourselves to forget hierarchies and fears, when we were just a man and a woman who love each other. I haven't told him yet. I don't know if I should. A pregnancy out of wedlock, particularly for a servant with a noble, is a scandal that could destroy us both. Henri would lose the respect he fought so hard to regain. I would be cast out in shame, but I carry a part of him, and a part of me. Something beautiful born of true love. How can I regret that? Emily paused, shock stealing her breath. Henri had turned deathly pale. She was pregnant, he whispered. When she died, she was carrying our child. Emily continued reading, tears already blurring the words. February 15th, 1874. I told Henri today. His reaction. My God, his reaction. He wept. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming joy. He knelt before me, his hands on my still flat belly, and swore, I will marry you publicly. To hell with society. This child will be born legitimate. With my name. With all the love I can give. I tried to argue about the scandal. He wouldn't listen. He said there are times when love must shout louder than convention. That this was such a time. We plan an engagement for March. Armand will be furious. But Henri no longer cares. He says he has spent too long hiding, allowing fear to control his life. Now he has a reason for courage, me. Our child. I am happy beyond words. Recklessly, impossibly happy. But the next entry, dated February 20th, changed tone dramatically. Armand found out. I don't know how, but he found out about the baby. He confronted me today alone in the greenhouse. He said horrible things. Called me a calculating prostitute, a fortune hunter. Said he would never allow a servant's bastard to inherit the Valmont estate. He threatened me. Not just me, but the baby. He said, accidents happen to pregnant women. Falls downstairs. Abortive herbs mixed into food. I am afraid, truly afraid for the first time. Not for myself, but for this tiny life growing inside me. For Henri, who would lose everything. For the future we glimpsed, and that Armand would destroy without hesitation. The last entries were written in increasingly hurried script as the danger intensified. Marguerite documented Armand's attempts to isolate her, to stop her from speaking to Henri, to keep her vulnerable. And then the final entry, March 5th, 1874, written hours before her death. I cannot stay any longer. Armand has made it clear he will kill me before he allows me to marry Henri. I planned to flee tonight. Henri agreed. We would leave Bellerive together, marry in Paris, and return only when the legal situation was resolved and the inheritance secure. But as I prepared my things, I realized, to flee is to leave Henri at Armand's mercy. It is to allow the poisoning to continue. It is to choose my safety over his life. I cannot let him die even to save myself, even to save our child. So I will confront Armand one last time, with proof, with witnesses if possible. I will force him to confess or to stop. It is risky, perhaps fatal, but it is right. If this goes wrong, if I do not survive, let someone know. I died loving Henri, I died protecting him, and I died carrying a life that was proof that love transcends all barriers society imposes. Our child will never be born, but he existed. He mattered. He was loved even before he drew breath. Emily closed the pages, unable to continue. Henri had moved away, his shoulders shaking with sobs that came from a place so deep it seemed to rip his soul apart. She was carrying our child, he said between tears, and she died protecting both him and me. 2 dead instead of 1. 2 lives that Armand destroyed. Emily approached, wrapped her arms around him from behind. There were no words to console him, only presence, human warmth, a reminder that he had survived and was honoring that death through how he lived. She chose, Emily finally said, her voice low but firm. She chose consciously, not because she was weak or reckless, but because she loved you more than her own life. It is a tragedy, yes, but it is also a testament to the deepest possible love. Henri turned, held her desperately. How do I honor this? How do I live in a way that is worthy of such a sacrifice? By living, Emily answered. By loving our children, by healing people, by keeping the Institute alive. Every patient we save is an honor to her. Every child we teach carries her legacy. She and the child who was never born live on through every life we touch. Henri nodded against her shoulder. They remained embraced for a long time, among the black roses that bore witness to secrets of love and death. That night they made a joint decision. The final pages would be preserved, but not displayed publicly. They would remain private, known only to the family. A small plaque would be added to Marguerite's memorial, and the beloved child she carried. It was an acknowledgement. It was an honor. It was a guarantee that this tiny life, which had existed for only a few weeks, would not be forgotten. Henri planted a special rose bush, a white rose, a symbol of innocence and unlived lives. He placed it beside Marguerite's grave, and there, kneeling in the earth, he spoke for the first time to the child he would never know. Forgive me for not protecting her, for not seeing the danger fast enough. I cannot change the past, but I can honor you, through Marie and Jacques, who lived the lives you could not. Through every child who is born at the Institute, aided by the knowledge your mother possessed. You mattered. You matter. You always will. Emily added her own words. I never met you, nephew or niece who was never born, but I love you because Marguerite loved you. And I promise your mother's story will be told truly, not as a scandal, but as an epic of love and sacrifice. You are part of that story. You always will be. The years that followed carried this truth as a sacred weight. Henri and Emily never hid the full story from Marie and Jacques when they were old enough. They told them about Aunt Marguerite, about the baby who was almost their cousin, about a love that defied all conventions. And the children grew up understanding. Families are built not just by blood, but by honored memory and a love that refuses to die. The years turned into decades. The 19th century gave way to the 20th. The world changed. New wars, new technologies, new societies. But at Bellerive, in the hills of Burgundy, something remained constant. The Marguerite Rousseau Institute flourished. It became a benchmark in herbal medicine, attracting students from all over Europe. Emily, now with grey hair but still bright eyes, had trained entire generations of healers. The knowledge her mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother had carried now lived in hundreds of hands. Henri, now in his 70s, still oversaw the Institute's operations. The scars had aged with him, becoming less shocking, just a part of who he was. The children at the Institute felt no fear of him. They saw only a gentle grandfather who told stories and handed out sweets. Marie Marguerite had become a doctor, one of the first women accepted into a French medical school, but she never abandoned the herbal knowledge her mother had taught her. She combined them both, modern science and ancient wisdom, creating treatments that worked where each one alone might fail. Jacques-Henri had followed a different path, a lawyer specializing in the rights of women and children. He fought in courtrooms for traditional healers to be legally respected, so their knowledge would not be criminalized as witchcraft. He used the education and privilege his position gave him to defend those without a voice. In 1900, celebrating the new century and 25 years of the Institute, they organized a special ceremony in the medicinal garden. People came from all over the region, former patients, students, families of women whose lives had been saved. Père Jacques was no longer among them. He had passed away peacefully 2 years prior, at 95, tending the roses until his last day. But his spirit remained in the garden he had cultivated with penitent love. During the ceremony, Marie presented a project she had worked on secretly for years, a book compiling all the knowledge of Marguerite, of Emilie, of generations of Rousseau healers. It was called simply The Healing Garden, Ancestral Wisdom for Modern Times. "My Aunt Marguerite died defending the truth," Marie said before the gathered assembly. "She died because the knowledge she carried threatened the established power. But her knowledge did not die. It lives in this institute. It lives in everyone who was healed here. And now it will live in these pages forever." Emily held the book with trembling hands, tears streaming freely. To see the official recognition, to see the knowledge that had always been whispered among women now printed and respected, it was more than she had ever dreamed possible. Henri held her, his own tears wetting her grey hair. "She did it," he murmured. "Marguerite changed the world after all, not through a shout, but a whisper that became a chorus. One saved life at a time." In the afternoon, when the celebrations ended and the guests departed, the nuclear family remained in the garden. Henri, Emilie, Marie, and Jacques, 4 generations of love built on a foundation of sacrifice. They sat on a stone bench beside Marguerite's grave. The black roses were in exuberant bloom. Lady Marie would have been proud. The white rose beside it also thrived, a permanent reminder of an unlived life. "Tell us again," Jacques asked, now an adult but still a child at heart, the story of how it began. Henri and Emilie exchanged glances. How many times had they told this story? Hundreds, but it never lost its power. It never stopped mattering. "It was the autumn of 1874, Henri began, his voice still strong despite his age. "And a brave young woman arrived at Chateau Bellerive, seeking the truth about her missing sister." As he spoke, the sun slowly set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The light poured over the garden, over the medicinal plants growing in organized rows, over the institute that rose in the background. Marie listened, though she knew every word. Jacques did too. Because stories like this need to be retold. They need to live in the collective memory, passed from generation to generation, reminders that dignity matters, that truth matters, that love transcends all barriers society imposes. When Henri finished, a comfortable silence descended, the kind of silence only old families know, filled with the presence of ancestors, with the weight of shared history. "She would be proud," Marie finally said, looking at the grave. "Aunt Marguerite." Seeing all this, the Institute, the book, us. "She is proud," Emily corrected gently. "Present or past, it doesn't matter. A love like that doesn't die. It just transforms. It becomes part of the earth, the air, the plants that grow. It lives in every act of healing, in every moment of compassion." Henri stood slowly, his body protesting decades of wear. He approached the grave, touched the worn stone gently. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything, for saving me, for giving me purpose, for leaving Emily for me, for turning tragedy into something beautiful." A soft wind passed through the garden, stirring the flowers, carrying the scent of lavender and rosemary. And for a moment they all swore they heard it, a light feminine laugh full of joy. Marguerite, wherever she was, approved. The family remained until the stars began to appear. Then slowly they returned to the chateau, no longer a place of suffering and secrecy, but a home filled with love and purpose. Behind them, in the garden under the rising moon, the black roses swayed gently. guardians of secrets that became truths, symbols of a mystery that transformed into a legacy. And if one looked closely enough, one could see between the shadows and the silver light a figure in a simple dress kneeling beside the rose bush, hands touching the petals with eternal love, eyes lifting to the chateau where light shone in windows, where voices laughed, where life continued. Marguerite Rousseau had never truly left. She remained in every plant, in every recipe, in every life saved. She remained in the love between Henri and Émilie, in the courage of Marie and the justice Jacques sought. She remained in the black roses that grew stubborn and beautiful, refusing to wilt, insisting on blooming even in the darkest nights. Because that is what true love is. It does not die. It just transforms, becoming eternal in ways that death can never touch. And there at Bellerive, under the starry burgundy sky, that love would continue to bloom. Year after year, generation after generation, as long as there are people who choose to heal instead of hurt, truth instead of lies, love instead of fear. Eternal as the roses that grow in secret gardens, eternal as the memory of a woman who sacrificed everything for love, eternal as the hope that is born even from the darkest tragedy.